thank you for accepting our invitation to give an interview. Can you describe what are your impression of meeting with the parliamentarian, both from the government, from the Republican Party and the opposition? Is there any consensus regarding electoral code, what they have done so far?
Well, actually, it's not just about the parliamentary parties and leadership. It's about the whole of the executive and ministers and other members of parliament from all the political parties and representatives from civil society and charities and so on and so forth, and departmental bodies and heads of that. Of course, our report is a very, very elongated report. It covers all aspects of life in Armenia and the monitoring process which has to prevail of the democratic process.
So it's not just electoral code, it's obligations.
That's a primary factor in it, but of course we advise different countries from the monitoring section of the Council of Europe. But we engage them in a whole series of ways, particularly in the democratic processes. But it's entered into a very substantial area where they wanted to improve their democratic processes by changing the system from a presidential system to a parliamentary system, which is very, very different indeed. And it means not just occasionally people taking the decision rather than one, a group of parliamentarians doing this. It's a whole way the government works itself, the departments, how they hire and fire people, how they train people, how they deliver services, and how they set up their system so that the public, the general public, knows what's occurring, and they too have a role to play.
And it takes time. I mean, there is a transitional time of 2 years that when the whole governmental body will convert into parliamentary country. What are your impressions, sir?
I had a good impression because I think that first of all there is a big effort in the country and also the debate of the political party to improve, because the change of the reform, the constitutional reform, and also the system electoral. Anyway, it is the way to go up. There are some problems about some details of the constitution, also the electoral code. But I think there is the possibility to give a much negotiation between the political party. Also because I think there is a spirit of dialogue between the majority and the political party in the opposition. And also I think that the government can try to the best. Anyway, I think the best answer at the question of Armenia, there is the valuation, there's the reform, and the new possibility to have a modern democracy, a modern constitution is the best answer also at the conflict that means Armenia in the question of Nagorno-Karabakh that is present also in the debate.
What is your overall kind of assessment on the progress of the Armenians doing its requirement? Do you see any progress, or it's kind of they kept the status quo because of the war, or there is a regress? So
no, I think
where we are now?
I think if you examine it, there's been major progress. If you recall, just a short period of time ago, the president agreed to incorporate a new structure which, if you like, gave up the role of leading the nation, and instead handing it over to Parliament to do that. And that's a major decision. In my country, kings did that, and they handed it over, and it's still, after hundreds of years, it's still developing as a democracy. And Britain yet is known as the mother of all parliaments. And I'm sitting next to a colleague here who represents one of the oldest democracies in the world, that in Greece, Italy and Greece, with the formation of the original concept of the democratic process. But the thing that's impressed me, really impressed me and my colleague, is the willingness of the Armenian people to insist that whatever system they do end up with is democratic and it's participatory. So they have a role to play in that, whether it's through the civil society or elected members of parliament. And we in the Council of Europe are about trying to create a structure which adheres to that, which is clean, which is easily understandable, is exact, open, and all departments of government are along those lines. And if they're not, Parliament deals with it and makes them so. It takes time, but they're well on progress. After a short period of time, they're changing from a presidential to a parliamentary. Some countries take hundreds of years to do that. It's taken a couple of years.
Mr. Galati, what do you think about the kind of the current state of the reforms being done by Armenia? Are you satisfied? Do you see progress or the opposite? Do you see that we are kind of
also
moving?
I'm very glad because I noticed that they give like a sample for the new constitution, the Italian model. And so I think that it is a natural progress because I think there is the system in the parliament that became central in the life of the power. And so I think it's good because probably that there will be a just separation between the several powers, executive power, legislative power, and the judiciary power. I think it's important, and also I think that there is possibility also to improve other mechanisms. But the question I want to tell, I noticed there is the sensibility in every part of our discussion that the importance to change, the importance to give a more example of democracy, because for this country it's important to stay in Europe with a new reform, a new model of democracy.
For the couple of weeks, for the last 2 months, the parliamentarians were busy talking about electoral code. The cornerstone of this debate is about how can we create a law that can guarantee the trust towards elections. So there are multiple versions how to do that. I mean, to put camera in every electoral places, to have fingerprints or something like that. What do you think, what is the cornerstone to form and to write an electoral code that can guarantee or provide fair and trusted elections?
We have to be very, very careful to know our role, and the role in the Council of Europe is to guide and help Armenia determine its own destiny. It's not our role to dictate. But I ask you this question back. When people talk about there has to be video cameras in polling stations, what happens if those people who run polling stations in the future align the videos in the direction of how and where people vote? Mm-hmm. And they say, oh, they wouldn't do that. There are many, many unscrupulous people at unscrupulous times that think about things like that. Whether that would be democratic or not, whether they put ink on people's fingers or stamp the back of their hands or take a picture or a fingerprint, is really down to the nation. Our duty and our job is to help Armenia choose its own path. And when it does, give it all the help, financial support and facilitation to enable it to get there. But we mustn't assume that we take the decisions for Armenia. We don't. It's the Armenian people who ultimately will decide it. And if they don't get it right, they'll change it.
All right. What do you think, Mr. Giamatti? Also, how do you assess this kind of new, not parliamentary, but a new public format, 4+4+4, when 4 representatives of the ruling party and then 4 oppositional party representatives and 4 NGO people gather together to discuss electoral code, and kind of they were trying to find a consensus on the points or fingerprints or I don't know, the cameras or something.
First of all, I want to tell you one thing. The democracy has a cost, but I think there is some problem because they installate the modern technology has a big cost, and so we saw that there is a problem to find just economic resource to organize the modern technology in every part of voters. But I think, just my colleague said, that there is different evaluation because sometimes the electronic system, video thing, concern the guaranteed democracy. Sometimes the possibility is also to recognize the system of the vote. So I don't think that this detail are determinant. Probably is determinant to know, for example, the list of the voters, because to avoid repeat of the voters. So it is possible, but other system, if they can create it, it's good. But I don't think that this is the difference to go in a modern democracy.
Just to check, what is the procedure? I mean, you go back and then you write a report. When is your deadline? Is there any publicly?
I'll give you some background to ours. I believe that we will return back to Strasbourg now and do our notes from here. We'll be gathered together in Paris in about, I think it's a week's time. We'll debate a preliminary report about us being here and what we learned. That will then go with us to another committee which we do in Strasbourg in June, in early June. We will then have a discussion on that, and it will then it'll go into various departments, be worked up, and we will return to the issue at the committee meeting, which will be at the beginning of September. From there, it'll be dealt with, and it will probably go back to the committee again in 2 stages in early October.
Oh my God, there's too much bureaucracy.
No, it's not at all. We have to get it right because it keeps going to committee.
It's a country report, right?
It's a country report. And what we do when we get there, what our aim is to try and remember there are 650 members of parliament, 47 different countries, and many, many different reports. Trying to get this report in late January on the session in the Assembly in Strasbourg, which is a miracle if we can do that. But I think we're aiming for that kind of timescale. Just returning to your earlier question, which is about the 4x4x4. That's part of the democratic process, bringing the governance board together with political parties and civil society. What we're doing, and arising out that 4x4x4, there are some people who are complaining that they never got this. But actually what is not being said by any of the 3 groups is what they did agree on. There are many things they agreed to agree on, and those are being put in action, and there's more still being discussed. And I think the process of that discussion is still going on and will go on. So it was a fine process. Didn't work out as an absolutely correct thing to do, but much was gained from it. And that needs to continue. It needs to continue because there's a very short window of space for Armenia. They have to very shortly start to get the code through. They've got from now till the general election in the spring of next year.
The deadline is June 1st.
No, then after they elect a new parliament, they then got a short period of time till 2018 when the president's term of office runs out. So you've got 2 short window times, 2 blinks in time, and all this work's got to be done in between, and they have to be ready to take over in 2018. That's the reality, and that's a big task. It means a whole load of decision-making formats the code has got to be introduced, the parliament's got to be ready, all the ministers have got to be prepared, the speakers panel has got to meet, the Prime Minister and all his ministers have got to be prepared, and civil servants too. So it's a heck of a task that Armenians took on. A lot of work to do, but has to be incorporated with all angles of the 4x4x4. They've got a major role to play in that, and we will help them in any way we can to do that.
And you came here previously when Armenia was in a tense period with Nagorno-Karabakh conflict was intense in April. Do you plan in any time soon to visit Nagorno-Karabakh?
We've been asked from a number of sources to do that already, and what we're aware of is that the history of Armenia and Azerbaijan is that in a time of conflicts they were allowed into the Council of Europe because they were both committed to peaceful progress to do that, and Nagorno-Karabakh was allowed to operate in the way it has since. We are committed to that peaceful process, and we will not be used. The Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe is about human rights and the rule of law. We will not be used by any side of it. Anything we do in terms of Nagorno-Karabakh is always in our mind, and we've taken advice on it, and we have done throughout our visit to Armenia this time. But when we go, we'll do it in unison with both sides agreeing for us
Well,
to go.
there was a precedent of Robert Walter that came to.
Yeah, but Robert Walters produced a report which I disagreed with,
Yeah.
and it never came into being. It was defeated by 2-1. Now, in happier times, he might have been able to defeat me on that subject, but he didn't. And we're as one that we believe the determination of the future of Armenia and Azerbaijan and Nagorno-Karabakh is in their hands. What we've got to do is help them and ensure that it's democratic and peaceful.
All right, and my last question, is it coincidence that you wear the same material type of tie? Is it new European fashion? You wear the same tie.
I think it's because we've got very good taste.
Okay, thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thanks.
All right, thank you very much.